Good day, you're watching Businessworld Live. I'm Danie, Laurel.
And I'm Delos Santos. Here are today's top stories. The World Bank expects domestic GDP to grow slower than initially estimated in 2023 as external headwinds are seen to spill over locally.
President Bongbong Marcos says inflation in the country is running rampant and out of control after the consumer price index surged to a 14-year high in November.
Unemployment rate falls back to pre-pandemic level in October.
And beginning today, San Miguel Global Power is formally stopping its supply to Meralco, covering 670 megawatts of power. We begin our broadcast with the World Bank upgrading its growth forecast for the Philippines this year, but at the same time trimming the GDP outlook for next year. The multilateral lender now expects the economy to grow by 7.2% this year. That's higher than its earlier projection of 6.5%. The upgraded outlook is at the upper end of the government's 6.5 to 7.5% target goal this year. However, the World Bank warns that growth momentum may slow starting next year. It projects GDP to grow by 5.7% for 2023 to 2025. That is slower than the initial growth forecast of 5.8%.
Deteriorating global environment is spilling into the domestic economy and is going to temper the country's growth prospects in 2023.
The World Bank says external risks have channeled through the Philippines in the form of peso depreciation, volatility in capital markets, and high inflation. The consumer price index surged to a 14-year high of 8% in November. The World Bank says inflation could weigh on growth prospects in 2023.
This is premised on, the second round effects have crept into inflation. As you can see, not only has headline inflation increased through the increase in food and fuel prices, but also it has crept into core inflation, which means that that maybe the second round effects, the wage increases, and increased inflation expectations. So based on this, even as we project that global commodity prices are going to fall again in 23 and 24.
Now, still on inflation, President Marcos said price increases are, quote, running rampant and out of control following the release of data showing inflation quickening to a 14-year high in November. At a forum, President Marcos described as, quote, unfortunate how main drivers of inflation are still imported. With this, he said substitution is still a good idea, not only for foreign exchange reserve, but also to keep inflation rate down.
Although our growth rate looks healthy, our foreign exchange our peso has become a little stronger relative to the other currencies. On the other side of that coin, there is still inflation that is running rampant and out of control.
The country become less dependent to imported products. Marcos urged businessmen to invest in key areas like education and skills training. The president is also confident that the country remains on track to achieve its growth target of 6.5 to 7.5% this year.
So to aid the transition that we are talking about, I invite you to invest in key areas such as education and skills training, digitalization of processes, and research and development.
The Philippine Statistics Authority reports that the country's unemployment situation has returned to pre-pandemic levels. This as the jobless rate in October fell to 4.5%. The labor force survey shows that the number of unemployed Filipinos in October is at 2.24 million, showing a decline from the 3.5 million or 7.4% reported in the same month of last year. It is also slightly lower than the 2.5 million unemployed recorded in September. Underemployment rate, meanwhile, is at 14.2%, translating to at least 6.67 million Filipinos. Underemployed persons are those who are employed but have a desire to have additional hours of work, to have an additional job, or to have a new job with longer hours of work. The October underemployment rate is lower than September's 15.4% and the 16.1% in October of last year.
In other news, former President and now House Deputy Speaker Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo says the idea of a sovereign wealth fund in the Philippines is nothing new. In a statement, Arroyo said that former Senator Bam Aquino once filed a similar bill in 2016. Her statement echoes the sentiment of Ilocos Norte Representative Sandro Marcos, who earlier pointed out an earlier iteration of the Maharklika Investment Fund. However, former Senator Aquino said that timing is key. Aquino pointed out that inflation and government debt had been much lower when he sought to establish a sovereign fund 6 years ago. The former senator also suggested that Senate take the opportunity to fine-tune problematic provisions, find better timing for the bill, and place the necessary safeguards. This is Congress' eyes to pass the proposed Maharlika Investment Fund on the plenary level by December 12. Senator Joel Villanueva, however, clarified that despite President Bongbong Marcos' support for the bill, it is not the chief executive that's been pushing to rush its passage. Villanueva also pointed out that the measure is not among the priority bills agreed upon by the Legislative Executive Development Advisory Council.
I don't think so, no. Wala akong, I was there during the LEDAC meeting, which is very, very fruitful. May mga priority measures kami na gusto nang itackle sana sa floor. That's one of the reasons why we were supposed to have a caucus yesterday. Unfortunately, we didn't have the time. Yung condonation, yung CDC, virology, yung health reserves, wala doon, wala sa listahan.
Now, our guest today is one of the more vocal critics of the proposed Maharlika Investment Fund. We have for insights Calixto Chikiamco, president of the Foundation for Economic Freedom and the political economist and columnist over at Businessworld. Sir Toti, good day. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so again, you have FEF, your group, together with other economists as well as the business community, voicing opposition here against the Maharlika Investment Fund. What's your sentiment here at the same time? How do you see this impacting the investment climate here in the Philippines? Should it be passed into law?
Well, we'd just like to explain why we're against it. No? First of all, you create a sovereign wealth fund when you have surplus funds. No, when you have either from a commodity price boom, like oil or mining, or you have a consistent budgetary and surpluses. No, but we are not in that situation right now. Our debt to GDP is about 60%. Our budget deficit is about 6%, and we're running a trade and current account deficit. So there is no rationale for putting up a sovereign wealth fund at this time. No, that's one of the reasons. That's the main reason. But of course, there are many others like the SSS and GSIs are private funds. No, and they have a different risk profile than the rest. Those are not public funds that can be used for development because they're saying that this is going to be used for infrastructure, for big ticket projects, etc. But again, the objective of SSS and GS investment is really to preserve the capital for the benefit of its members, not for the general public. So that's another reason why. There are also many legal infirmities in the bill, including the violation of BSP independence as guaranteed by the Constitution, because it dictates the BSP to declare its reserves as dividends to the national government.
Okay, sir, I'll just nuance some of your points there, no, because Finance Secretary Diokno already made comments on some of these things. For one, he mentioned that it's the choice naman of GSIS or SSS and their members whether or not to provide funding or money in this investment fund. He also mentioned that in other sovereign wealth funds, it's not necessarily the excess amount as long as we have some recurring revenues from things like mining or things like that. So is this not enough? And he also mentioned that we have over ammunition of foreign reserves, so it's not concerning for him. What can you make of these statements?
Very strong. Our foreign exchange reserves are dwindling. In fact, my colleague Ronnie Bernardo is expecting our international reserves to fall again by next year to about 87 billion from about 90 plus, no? Again, because of our current account and trade deficits, no? So I think that's not correct. And then we don't have recurring surpluses. You know, as I said, we have deficits. So where is it coming from? No. At the same time, again, the investment of SSS and GSIS has to be in conservative instruments, no? Because they are committed to give out the pensions of its members. No, it cannot be directed to certain projects, the government projects. In fact, they are contradicting themselves. They say that the MWF, it will be independent, free from political interference, etc. And yet they already have an investment plan. They said they'll buy the national grid, they will invest in infrastructure. So predetermined already, you know. So again, they're full of contradictions. They say it's also transparent, and yet you look at the bill, and then access to the investment records can only be approved by the board of directors. So they're full of contradictions.
Now, at the same time, like what we reported earlier, the proponents, particularly, of course, Representative Sandro Marcos and then former President Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, pointing out that, you know, there have been similar measures urging for the creation of an SWF in the past. I mean, the likes of the ones filed by former Senator Bam Aquino and J.B. Ejercito. What do you make of these arguments that they are raising, and how do these bills differ, especially given the time and context as well?
Well, I think Senator Bam Aquino said that, of course, one is timing. At the time he proposed it in 2016, the fiscal situation was quite healthier. Secondly, it did not mandate the SSS and GIS to contribute to the fund. So, again, it's a good idea, but wrong timing. Maybe in the future, we can consider a sovereign wealth fund. But again, we also have to take into account the governance issue. I think BSP Governor Philip Medalla raised this in this, there is a risk of another one MPB in which unless we fix our governance issues, the fund could be lost to mismanagement.
Sir, last point on the proponents, no? You also have GSIS head Vic Veloso, who of course is a very seasoned banker, saying that, you know, it's a normal thing to do, and it's something that when markets are low and prices are low, that's actually the time when to invest.
When step in.
Again, he's contradicting himself, because, you know, one of the investment principles of is really diversification, and yet he talks about it's going to be used for development. I mean, in other words, most of the funds will go to government projects, and we know the history of government projects. It's failure after failure after failure. So I think he has to review that. He's hunting the funds of government retirees. So he has to be very careful in where he's going to invest those funds.
And then this time, of course, let's shift the conversation to inflation again at 8% for last month. And you now have the president saying still, of course, it's rampant. But what's also interesting is saying, you know, it's still imported. How much of that statement is true, considering that some global headwinds have started to temper?
Well, no, actually, it's if you look at the BSP release, it's really food-based inflation. You know, food prices have been driving up inflation, no? You have onions, sugar, etc. No, so it's not. Part of it is probably imported because of the oil prices, but part of it is really we have a lower production because of the weather-related disturbances. Partly is because we import. Controls or quotas on imports of food, no? And finally, of course, we have in the fish. With respect to the fish, it's a close season now. Therefore, shipping fleets are not allowed to go out and fish, and therefore, of course, with December, with our Christmas season, demand is up, but fish production is down.
Okay. And finally, sir, we just reported the unemployment figures, 4.5%, back to pre-pandemic levels. The World Bank improving at least the outlook for growth just this year, but downgrading next year. But we also have some bright spots: the earnings in the third quarter, the GDP surprising in the third quarter. Tell us, what is the real outlook story here for 2023? Better ba siya than what we were experiencing this year, or will the headwinds make it a worse and more difficult year, especially as we see the US and other issues hounding already their economies?
I think 2022 was a surprise, and that is due to revenge spending. We opened up in the year. That's why you have seen increased consumption spending. But the outlook next year may be more worrisome again because first of all, inflation is surging. It's as the president himself said, it's uncontrolled, and therefore people might cut back on spending. And of course, there's a global recession that's looming. So those kind of headwinds will darken the mood for economic growth.
Okay, mahirap pala. Okay,
Ngayon pala,
enjoy na lang,
nakapagpata ng
sir,
spending eh.
for the 2022. But thank you so much for all of those insights. Very good insights indeed. Dottie Chikiamco, president of the FEF and Businessworld columnist.
Okay, thank you very much.
Now let's pause for a quick break, but coming right up after that. President Bongbong Marcos expresses concern over slow internet connection in the country as he renews his push for digitalization.
More of that and other stories on Business World Live return. Stay with us.
You're still watching Business World Live here in One News. I'm Jess Delos Santos.
And I'm Danie, Laurel.
President Bongbong Marcos expressed concern over the slow internet connection in the country. In his speech, Marcos said the country must improve its connectivity rate to be able to compete with its neighbors in Southeast Asia. The president says the country aims to embrace digitalization by doubling efforts to provide cellular and Wi-Fi services to remote areas.
Our connectivity rate is still pretty low. We're still below 70%. And that's not good enough, especially for an archipelagic country such as ours, where connectivity is exceedingly important because we have many isolated communities who need some form of contacts.
Marcos adds that his administration is willing to cooperate with its neighbors to boost internet connectivity.
If we are to survive, and even more so, if we are to flourish in the post-pandemic economy, we must digitalize. And we must digitalize and digitize as quickly as possible and continue to do so, taking full advantage, exploiting the new technologies.
Meanwhile, President Bongbong Marcos has ordered the Philippine Statistics Authority to expedite the printing of the digital equivalent of national IDs. In a meeting with PSA officials, the President directed the agency to print as many electronic national IDs and follow it up with the printing of physical IDs as soon as possible. The directive comes as the PSA struggles to meet its target for the distribution of physical cards. Now, in a statement late last month, the PSA said it has printed more than 3.6 million electronic Phil IDs. Latest printing issues were attributed to the late start of the flow of data as well as the volume of the data, which was less than what it is supposed to be. PSA said the issue has been rectified.
Now, the power arm of San Miguel is formally stopping the supply of 670 megawatts to Meralco beginning today, December 7. SMC Global Power says it has notified Meralco of its decision to cease delivering 670 megawatts under their Ilihan power supply agreement. SMGP and Meralco said they have already taken steps to ensure uninterrupted service to consumers. San Miguel Global Power's decision comes after the Court of Appeals issued a temporary restraining order which suspended the implementation of the 670 megawatt supply deal between Meralco and SMGP's unit South Premier Power Corporation. Meanwhile, Meralco says it has secured their certificate of exemption from the Energy Department for the competitive selection process for the supply of 670 megawatts. And those are the biggest stories on the economic and corporate front today. I'm Jess Delos Santos.
And I'm Danie Laurel. We are One News, all sides, all the time. But don't go away, we'll give you the latest on the local bourse when Businessworld Live returns. Stay with us.
And you're still watching Businessworld Live here on One News. Now, Dan, last week medyo umaasa tayo for some year-end merriment, but globally, some party poopers.
Party poopers, Jess, especially in the US. And you can see the S&P 500 down. That's actually the fourth straight loss for that, which is the longest streak of losing since November. And this comes after the banks or CEOs of global banks, or particularly US banks, sounded the alarm on the earnings. Morgan Stanley mentioned that the earnings for big companies are more expected next year to be hit, okay, as economic growth slows. She called corporate guidance as delusional. And on the back of that, I just want to show how, the oil prices have actually split. If I can get my mouse here to work, I'm going to ask the mouse is a party pooper. The mouse is a party pooper also. So let's see whether I can get that to work. But nevertheless,
we did see that chart earlier.
We did see that chart earlier. Oil is actually at around 74 to a barrel here. But one bright spot, you've actually got Cebu Pacific, which is the latest or carrier or budget carrier, seeing the capacity returning to pre-pandemic levels here. So a lot of things going on. You've got domestic issues actually positive, but then the price of oil negative, and that's brought our index, at least earlier on when I was able to access it, just going back to 6,600 levels today after having already seen quite a slump or a correction yesterday, Jess.
Let's try to still, if we can at least get the chart to participate. But of course, a big issue that we have to be discussing, something that we'll definitely be keeping an eye on, that whole saga, energy saga, at least between San Miguel and Meralco as well.
Exactly. So we'll probably try to get that back in a while, or at least when you do your broadcast later on. But nevertheless, some very important things to watch out for here. Whether the markets will be reacting, at least when I did check earlier on, we did see the likes of San Miguel quite flattish earlier on. Okay, and Meralco, of course, as well, one of not really moving here. Of course, there's still a lot to be digesting here for the distribution utility, whether that's going to be affecting their revenues after SMC pulled out the power supply agreement.
All right, something definitely we'll be keeping tabs on. That's it for today, December 7, 2022. Join us again tomorrow at exactly 9:30 a.m. You can also catch us on Signal Play. Register for a free account now at www.signalplay.com and stream One News live anytime, anywhere. I'm Jess Delos Santos.
And I'm Danie, Laurel. Stay safe, Philippines. We are One News, all sides, all the time.